In this edition of Probable Cause, Newsbud founder and editor Sibel Edmonds is joined by her guest Douglas Valentine, who is the author of several books. He has lectured and appeared on TV and radio talk shows, testified as an expert witness, served as a documentary film consultant, and worked as a private investigator. His most recent book is The CIA as Organized Crime: How Illegal Operations Corrupt America and the World. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, welcome to our show, Doug. It's been a long time since you and I had connected, which was, I believe, more than a decade ago. And I haven't read your recent book, but your book, Operation Phoenix, is one of those books that I consider one of very few books that I consider timeless. Because, and we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Operation Phoenix. And we're going to talk about its timelessness, meaning it was not something that took place in a vacuum and it was over. You know, a lot of things, people, the media, the academics, they make it as if, oh, you know, once upon a time, we did some bad things. And those were not good things. They were really, really bad. And then once we realized they were bad, we stopped doing it. And we're going to challenge that notion. And a good starting point for that is going to be delving into Operation Phoenix and your book. But before we get into that, there has been a new interesting documentary, mini documentary that was released just a couple of months ago called Wormwood. And this is, again, one of those CIA operations that was a hush-hush case for a long time. Still today, many people consider that a conspiracy theory. And one of the things I asked you when I emailed you, I said, have you watched the documentary series? And if so, we would be very interested, and I know our viewers will be very, very interested in hearing your take, your observations, your feedback on operation that was depicted in this, and the case that was depicted in this mini documentary, considering that you are one of the top experts with the CIA operations, with the book you put out long time ago. I think it's going to be invaluable for our viewers to hear about your take, because many people out there, they are talking about it as a masterpiece, as 100% factual. And we want to find out whether it is so, what were the shortcomings, etc. Now, with that, please tell us about your observation and feedback on Wormwood.
Well, I watched Wormwood with my wife, Alice, and who I've been married to for 40 years. And she's been through all my adventures and research with me. So, and we pretty much agreed on what it was about, which, you know, is reassuring. But it's certainly not meant to be a documentary in the sense of being absolutely factual. It's a dramatization, the way you see commercials that say, this is a dramatization, you know, and they're actually actors who are portraying real people and stuff like that. And this documentary, although it does reveal some very interesting things, does not even pretend to be absolutely factual. It's very much a show about Eric Olson's quest to find out what happened to his father, Frank Olson. Frank Olson died under mysterious circumstances in late November. I believe it was November 28th, 1953. He plummeted from a hotel window from the Statler Hotel in New York City and fell 13 floors to his death. At the time, New York City Police Department did an investigation, and they originally called it a homicide because at the time of his death, a CIA officer named Lashbrook, Robert Lashbrook, was actually in the hotel room with Olson. And so they figured, the cops being cops and always looking at the obvious explanation, just, automatically assumed that this guy crashed through a window and fell to his death, and there was somebody in the room at the time that guy killed him. Things quickly got intriguing because Lashbrook was a CIA officer, and Frank Olson was, although not in the CIA, was working with the CIA in a very top secret program which involved biological warfare weapons and their distribution so that they could be dropped on foreign countries like, say, Cuba or North Korea. And in fact, a few years earlier, a couple of captured American soldiers who had been captured in North Korea had claimed that they were part of a biological warfare program and had actually dropped biological warfare weapons on North Vietnam. And it was assumed, as the investigation developed at the time, well, let me backtrack. The CIA quickly intervened, and the NYPD changed its initial investigation and called it a suicide that occurred under unusual circumstances, because the CIA, from its inception, has an agreement with all the major metropolitan police departments that if there's any crime that's committed and it involves in any way the CIA, that particular police department will defer to the CIA, and whatever way the CIA wants that particular crime written up, they'll do it. So all the evidence was, on behalf of the CIA. The New York City Police Department just changed all its reports and swept this thing under the rug. And there it lay. It was forgotten for 20 years. The Olson family, Frank Olson's family, was told that he had committed suicide, that he had jumped out of this window, that he was distraught, and the family accepted that for 20 years. And then in 1974, Seymour Hersh did an investigation into CIA domestic operations. I'm not exactly sure who his sources were. His source at the time may actually have been William Colby, the director of Central Intelligence, who knew that certain scandals, certain information was about to be released and wanted to do perform what's called a controlled release of information. And Seymour Hersh may have been the conduit for releasing certain amounts of information without actually getting into all the details, all the dirty details. But that information came out. It was called the release of the family jewels. And among the things that were released at that time was the fact that this guy, Frank Olson, had actually been dosed with LSD a week before he committed suicide. This was a shock to the Olson family, and they immediately instituted some kind of legal action. And the CIA brought the Olson family, including Eric, who was now a young man around 25 or 30 years old, his mother and his siblings, brought them to Langley headquarters, told them they were very sorry that Frank had been dosed with LSD, that there was nothing nefarious about it. It was just what they called a terrible mistake. And they gave the family $750,000 and made them sign a non-disclosure statement saying that they would never pursue any more legal action. Eric Olson, and this is what Wormwood is about, wasn't satisfied with that. And over the next 40 years, he conducted his own private investigation to find out what really happened to his father. And Wormwood, the documentary, which takes place in 6 episodes, purports to chronicle Eric's investigation and all the things that he uncovered. And it concludes in the 6th and climatic episode with an interview that the producer director conducts with Seymour Hersh, which is very interesting because throughout the documentary, Eric and the producer present a case that Frank Olson did not commit suicide, that he was not distraught because he had a bad trip, but that he was actually murdered by the CIA because he was about to reveal details of the CIA's biological warfare program and the fact that it had used biological weapons in North Korea. And that he was a security risk, and that the whole idea that he was given LSD and that he had a bad trip and he got distraught and jumped out of a window was merely a cover story that was used to distract people from the actual truth, which was that he was given LSD as an interrogation method to find out what his intentions were. While actually being interrogated under the influence of LSD, he had revealed his intentions, which were that he was going to reveal the details of the CIA's biological and the military's biological warfare program, and that he was then sent to New York City and isolated, and situation and circumstances were created in which he was isolated from his family. A cover story was concocted, and eventually on November 28th, 2 hitmen were brought to this room, the room that he was in the Hotel Statler, and they bopped him on the head, broke the window, and threw him out. It was very interesting in this 6th and final episode because the producer quizzed Seymour Hersh and said, well, Mr. Hersh, you have said for the past 40 years that it was all about LSD and it wasn't about murder. And Hersh hummed and hawed. I mean, he's a very arrogant guy. You've never, it was like the first time I ever witnessed him on TV. And he said, well, I know things that you don't know. And I operate in this stratospheric world that you have no idea about. And he was just like the epitome of the most pompous person I've ever seen. It's almost like viewing the documentary is worthwhile just to see Seymour Hersh in his natural state.
Frank was somebody who has secrets, and he was dangerous. I can't tell you more.
Eric had put him on the spot, and he said as a result, he had gone back to his CIA sources. And one of his sources had gone into and this is what Hersh says in the documentary. One of his sources, in order to find out the truth about what happened to Frank Olson, went into the CIA's sanctum sanctorum, its deepest, darkest vault, the one that's buried somewhere in Langley, and that only the most trusted and valued CIA officers have access to it. And somehow this guy got in there, and within 2 days came back to Seymour Hersh and told him that, yes, in fact, he had seen a document that said that the CIA had murdered Frank Olson. And of course, the producer said, well, let's see the document. Show us the evidence. And Hersh said, well, I can't show you the evidence, and I can't even tell you the name of the person who revealed this to me because I have to protect my source. And I can't, if I was to reveal this guy's name and show you the document, then nobody would ever trust me again. And he kind of smirked. Seymour has a permanent smirk on his face anyway, and because he knows all this stuff that we don't know. And it was just excruciating. It was painful to watch this guy say these things, where poor Eric Olson had spent 40 years of his life trying to find out the truth about what happened to his father, and Hersh dangled the truth in front of him and said, I'm not going to tell you. Just take my word for it. And that is how Wormwood ends. But I should add, the documentary was incomplete, and it does not tell everything about the story. In particular, an author named Hank Albarelli did a lot of research into the Frank Olson case. And he actually identified through his own sources the two individuals who actually came into that hotel room at 2:30 in the morning and bopped Frank Olson on the head and threw him out the window. And Albarelli wrote a book called Terrible Mistake, and he identified these people. The identities of these people are not mentioned or revealed in this Wormwood documentary. They do, however, dramatize the event, and they have two kind of mafia-looking guys come into the room at 2:30 in the morning. They're never identified. They got Chesterfield coats and slouch hats, and they're very dark-looking guys. And the CIA officer who was in the room at the time, Robert Lashbrook, locks himself in the bathroom and opens the door to the hotel room. Frank Olson is at the time sleeping in a bed, and these two guys walk in and do the dirty deed. But they are never identified in Wormwood. But this other author, Hank Albarelli, identifies the two people in his book, Terrible Mistake. He identifies them as an informant for the Bureau of Narcotics named Pierre Lafitte, and a Corsican drug trafficker named Francois Spirito. So it was kind of bizarre to me, knowing all the details of the case that I know, and knowing that at least once, one author has identified these people, that their names and identities were not revealed in the documentary. So between Seymour Hersh teasing Eric Olson, which I thought was rather cruel, and Eric Olson and his producer not revealing the actual evidence that has been revealed about the case, I found the documentary very disappointing. And I think it would be interesting for people who know nothing at all about it and who are interested in a dramatization, and who are interested in how this odyssey, how Eric Olson's odyssey actually destroyed his life. It's a very, very poignant story. People might find it interesting for that reason, but in terms of revealing anything substantive about the case or about the CIA's MK-Utlra program, which was its LSD testing program, it's woefully incomplete.
I believe you contacted Eric Olson from Wormwood. For some reason, I remember that. Is that correct? And if you did, what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, I talked to him many, many years ago. He actually persuaded prosecutors in New York City to reopen the case. And that was around the year 2000. Forgive me if I don't have the exact date, but it was certainly around that time. One of the reasons they took the case and reopened it as a homicide investigation is that Eric Olson had his father's body exhumed. And that's when they discovered that he had been bopped on the back of his head. He had plummeted from a 13-story window, but there was no way to explain the bruising on the back of his head. So they felt that was the prosecutors in New York City felt that it was probable cause to reopen the case as a murder investigation. And one of those prosecutors is actually featured in the documentary. The documentary is very carefully edited, and this prosecutor does not mention the fact that evidence was presented to them that Pierre Lafitte and Francois Spirito were the murderers. That is not mentioned in the case. All that the prosecutor says in the documentary is that he did not have enough material evidence to bring anybody, especially anybody in the CIA, to trial. And he felt very bad about it. But I will leave your listeners to pursue this on their own, because it's a very complicated case, and there's a lot of things that we could talk about it all day. But I highly recommend that they read Albarelli's book, A Terrible Mistake, and which has many, many of the details that are not discussed in the book Wormwood. I also write an awful lot about the CIA's MK-Utlra program in my book, The Strength of the Wolf, which is about the old Bureau of Narcotics, which provided cover for the safe houses for the CIA to surreptitiously dose people with LSD. The Bureau of Narcotics provided agents and safe houses for the CIA to conduct its MK-Ultra program. And they did that for close to 15 years. And that's something that I feature in that book, The Strength of the Wolf. So, you know, it's drama, it's entertainment, but it's incomplete.
Well, I'm going to get the book. I'm definitely going to read it. But let's go back to CIA Seymour Hersh. Oops. Let's talk about that a little bit. I don't know. Do you want to go first? Because I have my own firsthand experiences from years ago, based on dozens of meetings, lunches, dinners, you know, all that. But let's start with you. And then let's compare notes on this CIA connections.
Well, you know, I'm a political person. And when I write about the CIA, I make sure to put the CIA into a political context, much the way Phil Agee did. I don't know if your listeners know about Philip Agee, but Philip Agee was a CIA officer who wrote a book about his experiences in the CIA. And he revealed the names of hundreds of CIA officers, and he caused the CIA awful lot of damage throughout his career. As far as I can tell, Seymour Hersh has never revealed the name of a CIA officer. There's never been there have been scandals, and there have been exposés, but he never discusses the CIA in political context like Phil Agee did. Phil Agee called the CIA capitalism's invisible army, the CIA. And he put its intentions into a political context so that when he would discuss the CIA conducting an operation in a particular country, whether it was Iraq or Ecuador or something like that, he would put the CIA's operation into political context, you know, saying that they're backing right-wing governments, they're backing fascists against leftists, that the CIA has a particular ideology, and that, like any organization, its mandate, the very reason for its existence, is based in an ideology. And in the entire 45 years of his career writing about the CIA, Seymour Hersh never puts the CIA in that kind of a context. It's always as if the things that the CIA are doing are happening in a political vacuum. It's good guys versus bad guys. America's good, and even though the CIA does dastardly things now and then, and he talks about these dastardly things, and it's always in a way that justifies everything that the CIA does because it's preserving America. There's always this subcontext to what Hersh says. And this is what makes him so beloved of the American bourgeoisie, of especially the upper middle class leftist people that form his fan base. It reassures them that despite exposing CIA misdeeds, he's always rationalizing what it does, and he's never explaining what it does in political terms or ideological terms. And it makes it safe for people to say, well, thank God, a guy like Seymour Hersh is out there reporting on the CIA, and we can know about the terrible things it's doing, but he never names a CIA officer. His sources are always anonymous, And even though he's apparently the CIA's nemesis, who's always revealing its deepest, darkest secrets, people in the CIA keep talking to him, which in itself is beyond belief. Because the first thing anybody in the CIA in a position of power is asked every week is, have you spoken to a journalist this week? They strap these kind of people to a lie detector.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anybody who's involved with any kind of important information, and they say, have you, you know, the first question they ask, have you been talking to a journalist? This is what they do. It's what the CIA security does. And yet somehow, for 45 years, CIA Mahersh has evaded CIA security, and he's still able to penetrate, like with this Birdwood case. He still has sources that can get into the CIA's deepest, darkest vault in a day, in 2 days, and come out with its deepest, darkest secrets. And nobody in CIA security has a whiff that this is happening. Which, let me tell you, as somebody who has had the CIA on his ass for the last 30 years, is impossible unless you actually have a quid pro quo with the CIA, unless they actually know that you're doing these things. Sorry, there's nothing I can do about it. And so anyway, I have my doubts, and for many reasons, including I went to college for English literature, and I studied literary criticism. The way Hersh writes his articles, as I was explaining to you, focus merely on the sensational aspects of the CIA. And there's always a CIA source that he's interviewing who says something like, well, for example, when the war on terror began after 9/11, he'll interview a CIA guy, and of course the guy's anonymous, and he'll say, well, you know, what we have to do is we have to take off the gloves, Seymour. We have to be tough, and we don't want to do it, but we got to get down and dirty. We got to be like the Israelis. We got to learn. We got to go back to the things that we used to do before Congress put handcuffs on us. We got to take the handcuffs off, and because the terrorists are out there, and we got to defeat them.
No, very Hollywood.
Let me just say that this is the subcontext in every one of Hersh's articles about the CIA, is that, and it's what is reassuring to the upper middle class bourgeoisie that love him and form his fan base, is that the CIA is out there doing the dirty work that is necessary to preserve our freedoms. And that is the subcontext of every one of his articles, and it drives me nuts. Even though he reveals scandals, it's nothing new to the public. I mean, everybody knows the CIA is a rotten bunch of crooks who torture and murder and eat babies for breakfast. You know, I mean, everybody knows this is what the CIA does. But see, Hersh tells the same story over and over and over again, and he's been doing it for 45 years, and the CIA is still tooting along without ever having suffered any kind of problem at all as a result of any of his reporting. And I would say the same thing goes for Glenn Greenwald and The Intercept and The Nation and Mother Jones and all the other supposedly heterodoxical investigative journalistic magazines and news outlets that exist around the country. They never do anything that puts the CIA on the spot or names a CIA officer. And at the same time, there's always this subcontext to their reporting that the CIA is a bad bunch of guys, but we have to be worse than the terrorists, and that's why we have our freedoms. And I'm here to tell you that that's a lot of BS. We're the world's foremost power not because anybody's worse than us, but because we're the worst, and we're very good at keeping it secret.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. In fact, I would say in some ways they are going about it just like Hollywood does, and that is actually glamorizing the CIA.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if Matt Damon is in his Jason Bourne movies, is a rogue CIA officer, and he's good looking, and I mean, he's a good guy. He saves the girl, and the girl falls in love with him, of course, and he resists all these bad things that the CIA does, but at the same time, again, there's the subcontext that we need the CIA to do these sorts of things. That's why Hollywood gets the approbation of the CIA for shows like the Jason Bourne movies or that Zero Dark 30 or something like that. And of course, there's been a number of books which describe the incestuous relationship between the CIA and Hollywood. They're one and the same thing. There is no distinction between the CIA and the media in the United States. They are the same thing. There's absolutely no distinction between them. If you think there's a distinction, or if there seems to be a distinction, that distinction is drawn so that you think that there's a distinction. It's a sleight of hand. It's smoke and mirrors. It's to make you believe that actually the media is really doing its job and trying to reveal something about the CIA, and nothing could be further from the truth. The highest levels of the CIA work intimately every day with the highest levels of the media industry in the United States to make sure that the very wealthy people and the industrial class continue to rule the world.
Now, this is a very important topic. I was going to list some of my experiences, first-hand experiences over many meetings, luncheons, dinners, etc. with Seymour Hersh, but I don't want to take up the time on that because we can even do that in a different session. I want to delve deeper into this because I talk with people who consider themselves very informed, well-read, and as you said, they accept the fact that the CIA does all this horrible stuff, okay? They are pathological liars, they murder people, female CIA agents, everything goes. In order to accomplish something, you can't sleep. Basically, an agency, in order for you to be an operative and accept it, and that's what I always talk about, you need to have certain qualification. You need to be a very good liar. I would say to a point of being a pathological liar. You have to lack conscience, because if you have conscience, you can't do that job. Okay. Now we have other agencies, FBI, etc. CIA is different that way. And in fact, it's not a joke. I mean, I mean it when I say that if we were to dissolve the CIA, what are we going to do with all these serial killers and genius charlatans? You're going to see the crime rate going up actually in the United States if they are not doing those horrible deeds, which is not to the benefits of any Americans, okay? What are we going to do with all these serial killers, the CIA operatives, the pathological lying charlatans, crooks, etc.? They're going to be like taking our crime rate and escalating to a level that we have never seen because they're going to be let loose in this country. Now, with that said, when I'm asking people, I say, okay, you're saying that, all right, CIA does these dirty things, horrible things, because they have to do it to save us, to benefit us. Then I have a follow-up questions for them. I say, how do you think CIA benefits you? Your national security, your safety, security. They have a pause. They have no idea how CIA is supposed to benefit them. Some of them may say things like, oh, well, they report back on operations or neutralize it. So, and because CIA is so secret, everything is classified, of course, we're not going to hear about all the great things they are doing for our national security. What would you say to that? When people say, well, the reason we can't name a single good thing CIA doing for the Americans, whether it's on their national security, whatever it is because, well, it's secret. They can't let us know.
Well, this again gets back to the idea of talking realistically about the CIA and not in terms of the sensationalism or the Hollywood image, and the first thing to understand about the CIA is that it's a bureaucracy, that it has an executive management, and a director who's a political appointee, and that it has a certain number of divisions. Anybody who writes about the CIA, if you want to understand the CIA, you have to understand it first and foremost as a bureaucracy that has a mandate, that has a structure that can be, that once you start breaking it down, looking at it in terms of an organizational chart, you can begin to understand it rationally and not emotionally, okay? I understand how you feel about the awful and horrible things that the CIA does, but it has to be discussed and analyzed very coldly as a bureaucracy. It needs to have magazines and newspapers actually reveal its organizational structure and show how it works, how the chain of command works. It needs to have people understand how compartmentalization works. The CIA certainly spends a lot of time recruiting people who are psychopaths, but the people at the executive management level, the people who manage the bureaucracy themselves, are perfectly rational people who go home at the end of the day. And on Sunday, they go to church or they go to the synagogue. They have a wife and kids. And for all extensive purposes, they're just like us. And they're very presentable. You can march them out in front of Congress. They can talk with business leaders. They can talk with people from other bureaucracies. And they themselves are not psychopaths. They're not going to leap across the table and strangle you. So how is it that an organization like the CIA can be managed by people who are perfectly rational, normal people? Well, you have to understand that it has to do with the way it's set up. And as you mentioned earlier, secrecy is at the very heart of it. There was a guy named Guy Debord who said secrecy dominates the world, foremost as the secret of dominance. People don't know what's done secretly behind their backs and how our government works, how the CIA exerts its influence secretly on the Department of Justice, within the military, within every branch of the government. They don't know that every important Senate congressional staff has CIA officers on it, and that the senators themselves are not able to look at CIA documents. Like the very top senators, when they get a briefing from the CIA, the briefing documents are classified and they can't even look at them. Even a guy like Donald Trump can't see raw CIA intelligence reports because they're classified. He doesn't have the security clearances. So there's this whole system that's set up of secrecy and how the CIA exerts its influence in every branch of the government and across the entire, including into Hollywood and every industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the arms industry. How does the CIA manage to exert its influence ubiquitously throughout the United States? Well, these are the things that need to be written about. These are the things that the American public needs to understand. Not that a very small portion of CIA officers are psychopaths who get a kick out of torturing and killing, but how very rationally this bureaucracy has been established in the United States and is secretly able to impose the will of a few very wealthy and important billionaires on the rest of us, because you won't understand why we're so frustrated and absolutely unable to affect any political change in this country unless you understand how the CIA secretly runs the country. Okay? So that's the thing that needs to be revealed. And that would take a lot of, I mean, it's not something that can be done in a day. And it would take a concerted effort by all the media outlets to begin to studiously do this. Now, as I said a couple of minutes ago, that's never going to happen because the CIA and the New York Times are the same thing. They're part of the secrecy. They're not going to let it happen because that's how their power is based on these secret agreements that happen behind closed doors. And it's a system that's been put in place over the last 70 years with the cooperation of everybody who runs the media in the country. So we only ever get the cover story. But if anybody really wants to understand the CIA, and it's possible to do it this way, as I'm explaining it to you, but it would have to be disseminated, across the country. It would require the dean of Harvard, the president of Yale, the people who run Columbia Journalism School, all these people to give up their privileged status and their relationships and start betraying the people in the CIA who guarantee them their privileged status. And they're not going to do it because it's these secret channels of information and control that assure the ruling elite in the United States of its privileged status and basically the other 99.999% of us renders us impotent. That's what you got to understand about. That's what it would take to change things, is to graph out this whole system.
That's absolutely true. But let's talk about the bosses, because CIA is not, if you go up the chain, they are not right at top of the chain. So we know that the CIA is not answerable to Congress. Of course it's not. It's not answerable to any president, as you said. They are the ones who actually rule the presidents. It's not the other way around. However, some people, very few, they go a step further and say, of course, well, they serve the interest of the deep state. And that has become a popular, catch-all phrase, deep state. Well, they are answerable to the deep state. They serve the deep state's interest, right? And we know that even from their beginnings, the role of the Rockefeller families with them, with the CIA. So let's talk about the real bosses of the CIA then briefly. Let's put some faces or names, whether it's the name of organization, let's put a few names and faces out there when we refer to the deep state being CIA's ultimate bosses, and the CIA not serving you and I, you and me, we are not served by the CIA. No ordinary American is served, other than actually they endanger us, meaning if we from the United States go to some hotel in Red Sea area, let's say in Egypt, and we get blown up because some terrorist group retaliated against CIA, which is a terrorist group, another terrorist group. Therefore, we become the collateral damage. So in fact, the CIA has been doing the opposite. The hatred towards us, the lack of security when we travel internationally, or even here in the United States, many of those are implemented by this terror organization. That's why I want to get to your book. It's perfectly named. It is a terror organization, and the other side's terrorists, they retaliate against us. Let's talk about the CIA's ultimate bosses. Who does the CIA serve? Let's put some names. Let's put some faces, Doug.
That's a big question. Let me give you an example. I met a CIA guy. He was a Marine in Vietnam, and he was recruited into the CIA out of Vietnam. And he was given deep cover. It was said that he was going to be assigned to the Philippines. So it was said that his father was an Australian soldier and his mother had been a Filipino woman. And she had gotten pregnant in World War II, and the Australian guy had deserted her, gone back to Australia. He had been, the fellow who was going to be recruited by the CIA, had been adopted when he was 4 or 5 years old by an American family. Never knew who his real mother and father were. This is the cover story that the CIA developed for him, okay? And around 1972, he was given a false identity and told that he was going to go to the Philippines, and he was going to say that he was looking for his roots. He had found out he was half Filipino, and because he was half Filipino, and the CIA created the false documents that proved that he had Philippine citizenship, and he lived there. And he then went to work for a number of companies, all of which the CIA arranged for him to work for. He went to work for Westinghouse. Now, Westinghouse has businesses all over the world. Westinghouse is part of the deep state. It provides cover for CIA officers all around the world. So does another job this guy had in the Philippines was working for a Ford franchise. He had a Ford franchise for a while. Well, the Ford Motor Company is part of the deep state. All around the world, Ford provides cover for CIA officers. I could go on. I could list 100 American corporations that work around the world that are connected like this with the CIA. Banking institutions, Merrill Lynch, arms industry, security companies, all of these businesses which are integral to the American empire are all intimately connected with the CIA. They are the deep state, but it's not just a deep state in the United States, it's a global deep state. And it has been in existence for 70 years. So it's everywhere. And every one of these corporations is perfectly happy to work with the CIA because the thing that the CIA does is I remember one time sitting in William Colby's office when I was interviewing him. And Colby had been director of the Central Intelligence for a number of years. He was a career CIA officer. He had agreed to help me writing my book, the Phoenix Program. And I was in his law office, and he got a phone call. And he goes, "Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Our people in the Philippine Congress are going to handle that. The CIA recruits people, and it puts them in the legislatures of foreign countries. It grooms them so that they have political careers, so that they rise up, as labor leaders in Ecuador, and they become very important in the labor union movement in Ecuador. But from the time that they first went to college and got CIA money, they're a CIA agent, and they're reporting and doing the things for the CIA. So apart from all its business connections and all the corporations that provide cover for the CIA and help it in its international operations, it also is grooming and recruiting people who work in the various political factions in all these different countries. And that's why the corporations like them, because they know that the CIA is manipulating through its agents political and social movements in foreign countries. And believe me, they're not working with right-wing organizations. The right-wing organizations are doing what the corporations want anyway. They're infiltrating and working with left-wing organizations. That's what the CIA does. It gets into the parts of a country that are resistant to the United States, and it works with people, and it creates agents that work in these, and like this is what they did in France and Italy. after World War II. The communists had basically won the war in France and Italy, and everybody loved the communists. And for 30 years, the CIA worked with what it called the compatible left throughout Europe in order to wean it away from the Soviet Union and create social democracies, which were apparently leftist-leaning organizations, but were in fact were pretending to be leftists and doing the CIA's bidding, and this is what the CIA does around the world. So this is what the deep state is. It's a million different people all working together, and the CIA has a station in every country, which handles these corporate operations and political operations and social operations, and it controls every one of them in every country. And this is whether it's England or the Ukraine or China. It doesn't matter where. They have a station in every country. Every one of those stations reports to its geographical bosses, where all that information is collated and sent back to division chiefs in Washington, D.C., and the most important agents are tracked and operations are tracked by the executive management staff, which doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter so much who a particular individual is in that position. They just know what they're supposed to do. They're maintaining these agent operations and the manipulation of these political and social movements, and making sure that the right businesses, American corporations, get jobs and contracts in these countries. And that's how the system works. I mean, I could get into it in much deeper detail, but if you understand what I'm saying, this is what the deep state is. It's something that it's a living organism that's been in existence for 70 years. And there's not a goddamn thing you or I or anybody else can do about it. I mean, other than to expose it constantly over and over again in this organizational way. To make sure, to constantly just revealing that it exists and it operates in this particular fashion, rather than just always presenting everything that happens as if it was a rabbit pulled out of a hat, and this is, it's brand new. And I should add that as part of it, to get back to what you were talking about, the CIA is more interested in infiltrating and creating terror organizations for political and psychological warfare purposes that create pretext for military interventions, and it isn't actually combating terrorism. I mean, what the CIA does is wherever there's a problem, it creates terror and creates a terror incident so that the military forces of that country, or even the military forces of the United States, can be summoned and put it, change the balance of power in that particular country. That is the most nefarious thing that the CIA does. But that's what it does on a daily basis all around the world. And that's what I talk about in my new book, The CIA as Organized Crime. And I outline that in detail, so much detail, it'll leave you weeping to think that this is what your country does. But yeah, it does that. And it does it for what's called, political and psychological warfare purposes.
Well, I still want to go back and talk about infiltration and management. Actually, part of them respond, they actually answer directly to the CIA media organization in the United States, more so today with even pseudo-alternative media outlets than what we had in the past. But before I get there are still so many people who believe this notion that the CIA, after the Church Committee, etc., they seized their operations in the United States. I mean, in a quick response, what would you tell these people? They say, yeah, they do all that. Basically, they say they shit outside. Okay, you're not supposed to shit where you eat. and they are saying, you know, okay, fine, here is where we eat, and they don't shit here. How would you respond to people who say they no longer shit here?
Well, first of all, like I said, the CIA has been in existence for 70 years, okay? So a guy who joined the CIA in 1950, or even was retired in 1955 or 1960 or 1970, leaves the CIA after 20 years, and he starts a business. Let's say he creates a security company, or let's say he goes to work for an investment firm, and or he opens up a Ford franchise, but he's still connected with the CIA. He still has all the security clearances that he ever had, and he still talks to his CIA friends. Well, just try to imagine. The Washington Post actually did an article about 5 or 10 years ago called Secret America, which talked about all these retired CIA officers and military intelligence officers who had careers with the CIA and in the military and are now out in the public. It's a parallel universe that's been created within the United States of retired CIA officers who are currently employed by the CIA, who have contacts within the United States, in the United States, that they deal with every day, people in business, people in Congress, and everybody who deals with these, whether they're retired or current CIA officers, are influenced by them. And they're influenced significantly by them. And they know that when these people's current CIA officers or retired CIA officers say something to them, like, I think it would be a good idea if you might be smart to invest in Hewlett Packard next week, because, or maybe you might want to buy some foreign currency next week because, things are going to change over there. That they have this incredible influence throughout the country. I mean, it's what you call the deep state. I mean, the influence of these people, these individuals, is secret. And only a certain amount of, other influential Americans are privy to it. But that's how it works, I mean, and there's millions of these people floating around, and they're all very happy to. It's like a private, the Masons or something like that, ring knock society, where they're all just linked together, and the rest of us are outsiders. So I don't know how else to explain it to you, because talking about it other than in specifics is very difficult. But to give you a broad example of how the CIA is able to affect its influences throughout society, that's how it works. I mean, and like I said earlier, former CIA officers become congressmen. Former CIA officers become executives in major corporations. They become religious leaders. They do a million different things. They form security companies. And these people do not give up their CIA loyalties or their connections. And after 70 years, it's beyond anything that you can imagine how ubiquitous and omnipotent this secret society is. And it all goes back to trying to understand the CIA bureaucracy, and which is obviously very secret. And it's against the law to talk about it. And the fact that it's against the law is the CIA's greatest strength, that Congress covers everything that the CIA does. It's makes laws that make it illegal to talk about the CIA. So if you want to start understanding the CIA, you got to get people in the Congress who aren't beholden to the CIA and start making it legal to talk about the CIA. Otherwise, the minute you start trespassing into CIA property, it's off to the gulag. Unless you're CIA more Persian, then you can talk about the CIA all you want, and never get in any trouble.
Oh, that's very true. But even their actual operations, I don't think it ever ceased because we have been investigating these arms dealing cases, and we come across these small plane charter companies in the United States, still with CIA working and bringing things, taking out things. Well, that's actually operations within our borders, is here in the
Oh,
United
absolutely.
States.
Oh, all the time. I mean, especially given the fact that we're now a global village. That it wasn't the same when the CIA first started, but I mean, you can travel around the world in a day now. The internet has dissolved all boundaries. Technology has, just absolutely dissolved any jurisdictional limitations on the CIA. First of all, they listen to everything everybody says. They know everything you're doing. If it wasn't for the fact that there's so much information that they can't keep track of all of it, you might be nervous. I mean, unless you're a big shot, they really don't care about you. I mean, like a person like me, just a mosquito, I mean, a nuisance, but they really are, after big fish and stuff like that. But they do, they have, the CIA has a new digital innovations directorate, which is entirely devoted to the internet and to computer operations. And they're able to affect currency transactions. They're able to affect elections through voting machines. I mean, they can basically manipulate political and social movements, not only in foreign countries, but in the United States as well, through this new digital innovations directorate. And they do it very easily just by making it appear as if some operation that they're conducting is actually taking place in a foreign country, when actually it's just coming out of, I mean, it's boxes within boxes. But ultimately, the CIA is mostly concerned about controlling political, social movements here in the United States. And they basically do it nowadays through this digital innovations division. They also, of course, do it through these millions of interpersonal relationships that I was describing to you a few minutes ago, that exist through current and former CIA officers and their personal relationships with people in the United States.
One of the analogies you made, I have been making that analogy for myself and for some of the whistleblowers we have had, some of the true independent alternative journalists. People ask questions like, well, why don't they kill you? Why are you still alive? And I say the same thing you just said. I said, we are like little mosquitoes. First of all, the information we try to put out there gets so blacked out. It doesn't get picked up. Even Google's YouTube has been messing with our videos that we publish there, the viewing there, etc. And then we point out, and we have been exposing, not only myself, you have done so, Doug, another great investigative journalist, independent reporter, James Corbett, and I, 10 years ago, we started exposing people, reporters like, I don't want to even use the term reporter or journalist for them, like Glenn Greenwald, like Jeremy Scahill, like Amy Goodman, and say that there is this perception that has been manufactured, created, given legitimacy to people that if you were to start digging, and you don't have to dig too deep, you start getting into the parts that you're hitting manure, and then under that you get to the swamp layer, and it's nothing but crap, and it's so easy to expose. It's not difficult. When you, for example, you look at what happened when Jeremy Scahill went to Afghanistan to write his books and report from there. They tried to portray him as this tough guy, independent journalist. He was based with U.S. military there. I had sources at the time who said this foo-foo guy every morning got his double foam cappuccino. He didn't go and conduct those were all illusions. And then he spent 5 days trying to grow some facial hair to show that he was being ruggedy and tough in the fields. He was never in the fields in Afghanistan. Those were all the illusion created by our operatives from the CIA and coming out as an alternative, independent, exposing horrible things we are doing in Afghanistan. All controlled outlet, controlled narrative. So when we expose these things, and I'm sure you have heard it too, one of the first responses from people who love to buy into these people with white hats, the good guys, they want to have that. It seems to be this innate need. People want to believe, even though they see evidence that contradicts, like a scumbag, excuse my language, I'm just being here raw, on Glenn Greenwald, they have this need, majority of the people, you want to feel good. You want to believe in these people. You want to say, they are wearing white hat, I'm going to cheer for them, even though some things my gut feeling says, that something is not right, because why are they making millions of dollars? Why are they given this access if it is actually what they say they are doing? One of the things they say to people like us, because we interfere with their Pollyanna feel-good state of mind, they want to believe that these are real people, they are good. And they say, well, you and James Corbett and Doug Valentine, you guys are just jealous. That's it. You are so jealous because Glenn Greenwald is much more famous than you are. And they make $2 million. And Jeremy Scahill is sexy, too sexy, has fan club. You guys are just jealous.
I'm too sexy for my shirt. Too sexy for my shirt. So sexy it hurts. And I'm too sexy for Milan. Too sexy for Milan, New York and Japan. And I'm too sexy for your party. Too sexy for your party. No way I'm disco dancing.
So what is your response to people when they face all this evidence, documented stuff, exposing these operatives, okay? These operatives, these false, just the front operatives. What is your response when they say, you mosquitoes, you're a mosquito, Sibel is a mosquito. Anybody who writes about these exposes these, even if they have great credentials, you guys are mosquitoes. And you're jealous because you're mosquitoes and they are sexy and famous and rich. What do you say to them, Doug?
Well, I read a lot about that in my new book.
Good.
The CIA is organized crime. And I talk about how my background is in literary criticism. And I went to college and I read Greek and Roman literature. I read the Iliad and I read the Odyssey. I read all the Romans. I read all the Russians. I read and read and read for many years. And I studied mythology and I studied the Bible. And I spent many, many, many years as a serious student of literature. And everywhere you go, the dominant story is called the myth of the hero. Okay?
Beautiful.
And people love a hero.
Yes.
They a guy that Jeremy Scahill, and a guy that comes out of nowhere and he goes to Afghanistan and he saves the people and he comes home and he tells his story. And they love this myth. This is the myth that we believe. This is the myth, the story that is told every day in 100 ways on every TV show that you watch, in every movie that you watch. It's the myth of the hero, and everybody goes, yes, that's a true story. It's true because it conforms to what I understand to be the truth about human nature, that there are heroes out there who show us the way. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are no heroes.
Very true. Very
That's
true.
a myth.
Absolutely.
And that since people first started writing, the ruling class understood that people needed heroes. And that the ruling class, this goes back to Homer and the Iliad, created certain heroes, and these heroes did certain things that served the interests of the ruling class. And societies have been deceived for 1,000,000 years by this story. And people have to divest themselves of this belief that somehow there are these heroes, Edward Snowden or Daniel Ellsberg or Seymour Hersh or Glenn Greenwald or any of these people that somehow are larger than life. And yet it's such an attractive story, and it gets into your heart and it makes you cry, especially when they save the girl and they have romance at the end of the story. These are the things that you want, that people are trained in the United States in particular to believe in. And every 15 seconds there's a commercial, and the commercial sells you a product. Mm-hmm. And you're told that, and you're in this state of mind of suspended disbelief where you're interested, you're really involved in this story of this hero. Maybe it's a woman detective and she's solving a crime of a missing child, and maybe there's some horrible things happen, but at the end she's going to solve the crime and she's going to be a hero. And then they say, we'll buy Gino's pizza. And you think to yourself, I could really use a pizza right now.
Right.
Or this kind of a shoe. And it all has to do with putting you in a state of mind that makes you willing to buy something. Whether you're whether you're buying Amy Goodman and the products she's selling, or whether you're buying Glenn Greenwald or the stories or the products
or you are voting for a president,
with putting you in a state of mind so that you buy something and that you actually cough up the money. And all these people like the Nation or Democracy Now! Or Fox News or MSNBC, they all have a corner of the market, and they all have people that believe the story that they're selling. Maybe it's the Hillary Clinton story. Maybe it's the Donald Trump story. Maybe it's a particular story, and they have a demographic that they're pitching that story to. But the story always involves this hero who you love, and then because you love him, whether it's Alex Jones' hero, you're going to buy the products that Alex Jones is saying. But people have known that they can sell you any kind of shit that they want as long as you believe the story. So that's what it's all about. It's all about selling people things and using this particular story line of the hero to sell it to them, to make them feel good. And well, all the writers in the world know how to manipulate you through the story of the myth of the hero to make you buy stuff.
Another good example.
What I tell people, okay?
Doug, another good example is, in 1980, a lot of people, they went out and they actually voted for a cowboy. It was Ronald Reagan, and they, even though it was, he was a B-rated actor, etc., a lot of people went there. He was a good guy for all these years in Hollywood. He was always wearing the white hat, never the black hat. And they actually voted for a cowboy. It had nothing to do with presidency or anything, but it was this hero that was depicted by Hollywood. And that basically governed the vote. And some people, the deep state, said, this is going to be good. We can have a cowboy character from the Hollywood and have that, because people, they fall for it. With that said, I'm going to end it by saying I am proud to just remain an honest mosquito. We don't sell any and we don't have any advertisements on our website. Our news organization is 100% advertisement free. We don't sell any vitamins. We don't sell Porsches. We don't sell anything. The only thing we offer is some DVDs and books that are educational, and they are produced by us. Those are the only thing we have. We do not receive a single penny from any foundations, whether it's on the right, whether it's Koch brothers, whether it's Soros, not a single penny. In fact, we don't even have the 501c3 tax exempt status, because that comes with the strings as well. Because then the government says, since you are not paying tax, you should not do this, you should not say this. We didn't want that either. Our entire news organization is supported by our subscribing members. And we're going to remain this way. I will never change that. We will never change that. All our team members believe this, because I rather remain an honest mosquito than become a manufactured hero with a sold out soul and intellect. That's not going to happen. It will never happen. And we are all of us truly honored to have you on our show. You have been around, it's the longevity. Someone who's been consistent. That's one of the things I always watch for. Did they sell out? Did they suddenly get to be the chief editor of Washington Post? Did they receive Pulitzer Prize or a Nobel Peace Prize? Those are the things I look at before, we hire our team members or invite our guests. And I have to say, we are honored to have you on our show. You have been consistently an honorable mosquito, okay? And knowing for the deep state, maybe little sting here and there, but honorable nonetheless. And with that, I want to thank you again for joining us. And we are going to have you on again very soon for the part 2 series to talk about your amazing timeless book, Operation Phoenix. Link that to Operation Gladio. Talk about how Operation Phoenix became the manual for the ISIS, and the fact that the whole notion of false flag has existed for a long, long time, long before 9/11, and talk about all that. Thank you very much, Doug Valentine.
Thank you, Sibel, for your very kind words about me too, and I'd be delighted to be on the show again.